in the last class, we talked about types of NGOs. Okay. We have also discussed about the concept of NGO, what NGO is all about. Am I audible? Okay. Uh, and different types of NGO based on the orientation, based on the size, right? Based on the intervention strategies, as well as inspiration. Okay, so today I will discuss a bit about the history of NGO in India. And in the very first class, we have very briefly discussed about the community organization, if you could remember, and a bit about origin. So, if you want me to have a relook into community organization and its origin, that I will do in today's class also. So, that is basically what community organization is all about. So, first, it is very, very essential for you also to understand the concept. Then, we will go about how to form a community organization, how to mobilize the community. First, you need to have a conceptual understanding about a few terms and terminologies, right? So when you say NGO, NGO is also often you say um, confused with community organization. It is not like misunderstood, but it is confused because the term NGO is quite broad and it involves like this business-oriented organization, government or operated organizations, environmental organization, all the pressure groups and interest groups. But NGOs are different from pressure groups and interest group by the very fact that it is people-oriented. All the NGOs are people-oriented. But pressure group and interest groups are also working for the people, but not necessarily they do have vested interest for the people. In the long run, they do also have an interest, a cause, which is definitely for the people. But when you say people oriented has also got a different understanding altogether. It all means that you try to make people manage the resources. That's how you can have a clear understanding of people orientations. So how NGOs are different from the pressure and interest group? Just because it is people oriented, it helps people to manage the resources, existing resources. It helps people to understand the need within the community. You visit one community, you won't even realize that people will understand the very basic needs. Okay, so this is the first and foremost responsibility of an NGO practitioners, a development practitioners or NGO professional is that to understand the need of the community. So what they actually seek and to make them realize the need. You also understand the need and make the community realize the need and try to establish a balance between the existing resources and the need. So when you see trying to create a balance between the existing resources and the need, you also need to carry out some of the fact-finding study. So you need to know the resources. And that is the very essence of community organization. So when you say community organization, you are supposed to have a common interest which is going to bound the community apart from their other specification like the geographical specification, occupational specification, ethnic origin. Okay, that is also another specification. You talked about the religious orientation. So there is one factor that is common interest which will be binding the community that you need to find out, and that's how you can understand the community organization, and that's how community organization to certain extent distinct itself from this NGOs. NGOs is a broad spectrum. It also involves the community organization, and earlier even NGO, the idea of non-governmental organization stems from rise from the community organization, right? So in the USA, that concept has emerged. Even in India also, we have a long history about voluntary organization, right? We have a long history. When we can also trace the history of voluntary organization. Now, voluntary organization and community organization, these are two terms and terminologies. You see, and to certain extent there are some distinction also. Voluntary organization is also people oriented, but here it is based on the commitment of shared values. Interest is also there, but it's more about the accountability, leadership accountability to the members. Okay, are you understand? Hmm. Are you able to understand? Means when you say VO, voluntary organization, the members' voluntary commitment to a shared interest or a common goal is must. Apart from that, the leader of that group are supposed to be accountable to the members. So that's how you can distinguish it. But when you are talking about the community organization, the very basic essence of the community organization is to aid the community to manage themselves, aid the community to understand their basic needs, aid the community to create a balance between the existing resources and the needs, to understand even the existing resources in the community. So that is the distinction between the community organization and VO. Now, in India, we talk about VO, and in West, we talk about community organization, right? So, when we are talking about VO, voluntary organization, if we can trace the history of voluntary organization earlier during ancient period, you have a system called this is called Adhina. Adhinam and Madhukhan. Madhukhan and Adhinam, I'll write it down. Madhukhan means when a Brahmin guy, Brahmin boy, support himself by dispensing services in different households. So during Gurukul, he has to dispense service in the different household, and that's how he support himself. So there was also a norm on the Brahmin can study, right? They have that prerogative to educate in India. So how do they educate themselves? They also dispensing their labor in the household, at the same time they support themselves, and this is a kind of, you see, is taking as a charity sort of, or also as a voluntary, voluntary exchange of labor, or voluntary commitment uh, to a child interest. Okay, so that's how it is viewed at that point of time. That is Madhukani. And when you talk about this Adhinam was there. Those are some of the community research organization or learning organization, which are based on the the interest of the community, where there is free boarding and lodging is available. Okay, so these are some of the efforts which took place during ancient time. Okay, in medieval period also we have, you see, like during Maurya period, Gupta period, we have also seen there's some kind of voluntary action has been carried out during Asoka's regime. Okay, during Gupta dynasty's regime, voluntary activities are carried out related to this charity work. Okay, and during colonial period, everybody knows about the social reform movement and the work of Christian missionaries, right? So, when we are talking about the voluntary activities in India and voluntary organization, even in an informal way, it is not something very new. It's not that innovative in India, because it has been existed in India for long, and we also see that in India. During British time, Christian missionaries, although they are Western, and there are also Indian bourgeois class who are Western educated. They also carried out various voluntary activities during that period of time, or charity related activities. And in India, the first organization came in as voluntary organization that was known as Friends in Need. Friends in Need, that came in 1858. Friends in Need. Friends in Need. That came in 1858. Okay, so and thereafter it carried carried forward, like different social reform movement we get to see, and also organization like Ramakrishna Mission, Brahmo Samas, Arya Samas, and also there is Bengali intellectuals. Then the Bengali intellectuals at that point of time, they actually carried out various reform movement, and they also held the flag of that charity and philanthropy work in India. So that was, you see, that was a brief about the history, but it is not over yet. But what is important in the post-independence period about this voluntary effort in India. So during the post-independence period, we also get to see that there are certain ups and downs. Ups and downs in the sense, up ups and downs with regard to the relationship between the, the NGOs and the government. Now, NGOs, if we look at NGOs, NGOs can be defined by certain characteristics. And yesterday I have already told you those characteristics, right? There are certain characteristics which will define the NGOs. Apart from that, also there are some is very distinct features which will define the NGOs. Like NGOs are voluntary. They are voluntary. That is the first and foremost criteria. NGOs has a legal aspect. Okay, that is the second criteria. Third criteria is that NGOs are non-profit, like organization. When you say non-profit, whatever profit they earn is not used by them. Okay, but or it is not even shared among the stakeholders. It is also utilized or reused for the community development, and also it is autonomous and independent, free from government control, and it has that flexibility to work. And also, you see, because of which it has a quick decision making apparatus. So, if you look at the management, there is a quick decision making apparatus at one go. You need to take some decisions quickly, and flexibility is also there. That has actually devoid the vegetarism and bureaucratic works culture in government office. Okay, so in that way, in opposition to that bureaucratic, like that or bureaucratic work structure, or see that government red tapeism, NGOs are quite quick to take decision, and also value laden. Value laden is important. When you say value laden, so NGO is always inspired by the humanitarian values, and also it try to achieve those goals. Okay, humanist goals are there. So humanist goals, reducing poverty, alleviating poverty, like uplifting this standard of living of the people. So these are all value laden goals. So these are some of the characteristics that will help you to define apart from the legal status, which is very very important. And also when you look at the history, when you try to trace the history, you will also get to see that it has acquired, and Jews have acquired legal status out of lot of deliberations. Because when you say deliberation, in the sense there is a process of you see the passing of that bill, and then it become an act, a social society registration act, then companies act, trust act. All this act came during this colonial period itself. So it actually came, this act actually came out of the deliberation of the NGO professional and the bourgeois class, educated bourgeois class of that period, who were philanthropic in their intent, okay, intent of delivering their services. Okay, so those act came, and accordingly it is essential for NGO to register with the act. Now, if you look at the NGO and government relationship in the post-independence period, it's very very important, because most of the time we simply know that NGOs are non-governmental organization as such, that they are not controlled by the government, right? So NGOs are not controlled by the government. But when we say non-governmental organization, they also need to like, uh, need funds to survive. Now, when you talk about the funds, like how they manage those funds and all, there are a lot of scandal and fraud activities also happen, which actually lead to distrust and dismantle the whole apparatus of NGOs. Okay, so how they actually receive funds, whether in the right way they have received funds, and whether it has clashed with their commitment to the community or not, because they have received funds from a donor, they do have donor have a different objective altogether, and you have a different objective and vision. So there are like classes at times in channelizing the fund which they have received, and to achieve the task in accordance with the objective they do have. Okay, so that class is often there. So we will come to it when we discuss about the challenges of these NGOs. But when you talk about the relation of NGOs with the government during the post-independence period, so it's very very important to understand the history of NGO. And when you say history of NGO, basically it is also at times overlapped with its relationship with the government. Its interaction, NGO's interaction with the government. So during the post-independence period, just after this India attained independence, independence, we actually see a very romantic kind of relationship between government and NGO. That's romanticism like having between government and NGO. So, and that actually that is termed as a kind of cooption or dependency on the part of the NGO. So you can also say most of the time NGO receive funds from the government, but that's how government made NGO dependent on them. Okay, so you see NGO at that point of time worked as a shadow state. Shadow state. They instrumentalized government visions and instrumentalized the development programs of the government at that period of time. Okay, actually, what happened during that time is that you see most of the NGOs are inspired by the Gandhian ideology, because following that freedom movement, you see that there are voluntary organizations, informal and formal setup, inspired by this Gandhian ideology, because you see during freedom movement, Gandhi's ideology has already swayed the people's mind, influence a lot, and taking to it various urban entrepreneurship as well as urban middle class and youth. They also mobilize themselves uh, uh, by driven by this Gandhian influence or Gandhian ideology, and they have also made some community formations and try to invest themselves on the rural reconstruction. Now you see all these NGOs actually focused upon the rural reconstruction. When it's a rural reconstruction, that means a community reconstruction, reconstruction. That was the primary focus of those very NGOs during the post-independence, immediate post-independence era. Immediate in the sense that from 1950s to 60s, immediate period. So all these NGOs are basically focused upon the rural reconstruction. So how to make a community self-reliant. It's very very important how to make that community self-reliant. And in order to make that community self-reliant, that Swadeshi movement has already swept in, that influenced the people to develop the cottage industry, comfort industry, to furnish that, to refurbish those industries. Okay, so in that way, you actually see there are certain movement in Santiniketan also. There is a movement came in, village reconstruction related movement that came in 1921 prior to independence, and that was carried out. And then also we have Gurgaon project was there, and there is also a project of we see that Sarvodaya. Okay, that came in at different period of time. This is based on basically village reconstruction, reconstruct the whole village and specially focus on this cottage industries, handloom industries, agriculture, and this condition of the peasant. And during that period of time, you actually see this peasant has suffered a lot. Okay, and I'm not going to go details about how they have suffered, because I'll come to it later on. But they suffered a lot. So in order to ameliorate their conditions, like improvise their conditions, it's very very important to take some actions. Also give them some benefits. Okay, and also think about economic development. So how to give them job, how to give them some of facilitate them to work in such a way so that they can also raise their standard of living. So these NGOs are to such an extent they work for economic development. They work not for social development, basically for economic development. Now we see all those NGOs did not focus on this awareness building or consign ticing. Okay, so their goal is not social development. Their goal is village reconstructions, and which is also in aligned with economic development, in aligned with uh, even with service provision, building road, building infrastructure. That is also one particular goal, and to certain extent, charity, getting the charity, getting the fund from the government. Charity has a very latent, manifestation there. Very latent way it was involved, not like giving food, clothes, like distributing food, clothes, kapra, makan, whatever. But it is there to charitize, and government needs to charity, provide the charity, and that was basically an ashram model of development. I'll discuss about it later on. Ashram model of development. We will discussed about various type of developmental models. Here it is very very essential to learn also and understand various types of model and how those models are aligned or connected to NGOs. Okay, so Ashram model of development, but it did not last long. So what happened? NGOs like we came to learn that they are being coopted or they are being dependent, gradually being dependent on the government, and that has created a kind of disillusionment among these NGOs. And what happened during that period of time? You see CSWB, Center for Social Welfare Board. So that was established, and also there is KVIC established, that the Khadi and Village Industries Commission established. They provided fund to NGOs. Now let me tell you, when you are talking about funding to NGOs, those funds were for project and programs, not for any infrastructure. So government gave funds. To certain extent, service provisioning was there, but you see, there were 100,000 NGOs were registered, and they got the fund from CSWB. They got the fund from KVIC to, to carry out to fulfill and accomplish their visions. But those funds are very program centric. Certain programs like government developmental program, government coming, and they also give the fund and to NGOs and help them to execute it. But you see, after that program is over, so you see, surplus NGO won't work for a surplus benefit also. So it's very difficult for NGO to survive because government won't give fund for infrastructure building. So those fund is program centric, not infrastructure centric. So hardly even 10 or 20 NGOs survive out of 1,000 NGO during this first very 10 years. Okay, so that was the condition in the very first honeymoon period of cooption between this government and NGOs. You see that like from 50s to 60s, just because funds were program centric. Okay, service provisioning was also there, but initially they won't give much emphasis to infrastructure building. Infrastructure means NGO, how they will build the infrastructures. They also need some logistic, right? Logistic management, isn't it? But that is not helped and aided by this by government. Okay, so those funds were basically program specific. Now we see, when we discuss about the NGO, you understood what I'm saying? What I mean? You understood, no? If you have problems, simply raise your hand and ask. Okay. So when you are talking about types of the NGOs, yesterday I have discussed about various types of the NGOs, right? So this types, as I have told you, that small size, large size, and medium size. Now this size was there, and then we have, you see, we have size wise there are divisions. Then we have a division on the basis of the scope, on the basis of the time, on the basis of the goal. Okay, so we will look into those NGOs because there is also a change and shift in the whole agency and the philosophy over the years. Okay, so first, if you look at those parameters like a time frame, and if we look at certain NGOs like relief and rehabilitation NGO is one. Then we see community development NGO is one kind of NGO. Okay, and we have a social movement. We have discussed about it. That is one kind of NGO, and we have a sustainable development NGO, sustainable development system NGO. If we look at these very NGOs, no, on the basis of certain criteria like time frame, relief and rehabilitation has a very immediate time frame, right? Because it is actually need based, and you have to very quick to dispense the fund and disburse the money in order to fulfill the needs of the immediate needs of the people, like a community struck by this calamities. So the immediate action you need to take. So that time frame is also very immediate. But when you are talking about the community development, the time frame is not immediate. Time frame is basically, it lasts from like 1 year to 10 years, not more than 10 years. So okay, so you execute a project and it is project specific. Now you see relief related and charity related organizations, the whole management is also different. Now there are certain criteria, time, scope, management. Okay, so management, if you look at the management of this relief rehabilitation, they're based on the logistic development. Logistic, these are and this logistic development in terms of like building the house for a few communities, rehabilitate them, so giving them some land also, some settlement, also build a school because like that is also come, that will come under the relief work, and to certain extent this is also pertaining to service provisioning. But yeah, so helping to build the logistic at the same time, that logistic management is the like prime criteria. Now for community development, project management is the prime criteria of NGO management. They will manage certain project for 10 years, project for 20 years. So if you work on those projects, you have also invested yourself to and to one or two projects, because you become a part of one or two project, right? So that project will be carried out for 1 year, 2 year. Though they have a durations, and for that funds usually come. And that's how NGO also manage themselves. So you see, so everything when you talk about the management of the NGO, here I'm not going to go detail about the management, but the time, the you see scope, the program, the NGO management, everything, and also developmental goals are related, you know, and that is also related to their survivability and related to their sustainability. So it's very, very important to understand it as a wholesome, not as a part. Okay. So, but I'll try to like, extract out something and then deliver it on it. So here, so when you talk about, I'm not going to write size wise, you have a like variation of NGOs, big, small, and like medium, and employers wise, like most of the part timers are there in small NGOs, right? And 2 to 5 persons are there who are full timers in a small NGOs, and they work in a village and is a neighborhood level in like 2 3 villages in one particular block, and those are basically community development organizations. Most of them are community development organizations, and they do have a development kind of like local development approach. Okay, so we'll discuss about this approach. Okay, and the small size of NGOs, and when you say medium size of NGOs span across a district also, not across the nation, across a district, and you have like 10 to 15 full-time employers, and rest are the part-times, and they are also project oriented, and project they get the project amount to 1 lakh to 10 lakhs, not more than that in a year. Okay, and they also like work across the district. Okay, so most of the small and medium types of NGOs who were prevalent during the very first phase, honeymoon phase of the like NGO government interaction. So when you talk about the very first phase, 1950 to 1960, this is a kind of honeymoon period. Okay, this is a romantic period between government and NGO, and that honeymoon has created a kind of disillusionment, among those young middle class, because they come to realize that they are simply the puppet of governments. They are instrumentalizing government vision only, but yet they do not work on their visions because they have invested themselves voluntarily. Okay, so they do have their own commitment, but they do not realize that commitment. So that kind of disillusionment has actually has created a revolutionary kind of thing during 1960 to 70. So we get to see a lot of antagonism, antagonistic. So you usually see antagonistic scale during that period of time, 1960 to 70. That antagonistic scale in the interaction between this government and NGOs during that specific period. And you see the first period was dominated by those Gandhian NGOs basically. Huh. And they're inspired, but they carry forward that Gandhi's ideology. In the second period, we get to see uh, that domination of Marxist ideology, various trade union and the Sons Sabha also came in. Okay, during that period, and these NGOs were also moved by and inspired by a philosophy of J.P. Narayan as well as Vinoba Bhave. That is also like Damdan and Bhumidan movement can be related to Damdan Bhumidan movement, and NGOs were inspired by their revolutionary instinct. And what happened during Indira Gandhi's period, most of the NGO personnel got arrested also. Okay, because there is an antagonism, and particularly young middle class, they emerged out, middle class youth emerged out of that disillusionment, and they got inspired by Vinoba Bhave. They also took a kind of revolutionary intent, and they they tried to fulfill their commitment to the community. So and outside government control, and that has also created a kind of antagonism between the government and the NGOs, and NGOs leaders were arrested during that emergency period. And again, you see that and created a lot of suspicion and distrust also. And you see what happened thereafter. Uh, Janta government came in. Janta government came in, but like it didn't last for many years, only 3 years. Um, Tried to give some reprieve to those NGOs, but again, that Congress government came in by 1980, and that state control continues. Okay, so from 1980 onwards, we get to see 1980 onwards, we actually get to see a state control over the NGOs. And when you talk about the state control, we see in 1976, FRCA 1976, FCRA, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act was passed. So it is a very important act along with the Finance Act was also passed. 19 Act was passed 1983, and 1976 this act was passed. And these two acts were very, very important. Okay, first act you see, it has also regulated the contribution NGO received from the foreign sources, because there was also a doubt that most of the NGOs received fund from SIA to carry out some of the very adverse or um, some of criminal activities. So receive fund from SIA. So that was doubted, and hence this act has regulated the foreign funds. When you say regulated the foreign funds in such a way that that NGO is while receiving fund, uh, that has to inconsistent with sovereignty and integrity of India. So those very principles which is applicable to India also while receiving funds. While receiving funds for the activities which should not lead to an unfair elections. So fair and equitable election provisions should be there. So while receiving funds and utilizing it for what purpose? So when you actually go through the criteria of receiving fund, and also for public interest, that is also another criteria, and maintaining harmony. So these are certain criteria. We'll discuss about this at later on, but it is very, very important in order to get the foreign contribution, and that has been regulated. And also the way and to get foreign contribution is also scrutinized, and also foreseen by the government. And how it has been scrutinized, you see, it has to come through a bank account, and that bank account has to be audited by government officials. It is audited, it is to be inspected. So one bank account which is regularly audited and inspected, like how much fund come, whether it has invested on the right purpose or not. Like that way, that regulation came in, state regulations, how they have received those funds, from which sources, how they have utilized those funds. Okay, so one designated bank account is there that has to be submitted to the government, and government will scrutiny. and inspect that bank account. So that is a state control, like that is a kind of state of state control along with this act. Then finance of that came in 1983. What happened in the very first period when there is an enormous state funding that actually failed away the business enterprises from funding those NGOs. Okay, sourcing this NGO, because you see there is enormous fund and, like, a magnificent amount they receive from government. So in a way, they also it also discourages the business enterprise to fund the NGOs in the very first period. And in the third period, actually, see, Finance Act was passed, and that made, you see, uh, the income tax that actually exempt business organization or corporation exempt from the tax, income tax. Okay, if they fund an NGO. So in a way that has a kind of that has created a corporate agenda. Okay, so we see this to act where there is very important, as well as Kudal Commission. Kudal Commission at that point of time, Kudal Commission investigated movement, Gandhi Peace Foundation, Kudal Commission was appointed, investigated Gandhi Peace Foundation, which was an umbrella organization of more than 945 subsidiary organization. So investigated it because at that point of time there are a lot of public hearing by the NGOs and lot of campaigning based news against the government. So government also government also made a statement that NGO got distracted and confused, and also appointed a Udan Commission to investigate the Peace Foundation, which was an umbrella organization of more than 945 NGOs. Okay, but nothing came out that no charges could be made against this. But that actually led to dismantle of that umbrella organizations, and there is also a rebirth of many new NGOs which actually instrumentalize the government visions, and most of those organizations are action oriented and service delivery oriented. Okay, so action oriented at national level, action oriented. When you say action oriented, they basically go for networking with other NGOs. So we have also a division of NGOs, network NGOs. So when NGO work as a federation. So these are basically action oriented NGO. They network with 2-3 NGOs and create a federation, and for a temporary basis they invest themselves on a project, they work on a project. Okay, that is action oriented. Service delivery NGOs, they are welfare, basically welfare oriented NGOs. They also came up with various welfare plans and try to execute at local level. Okay, so like that way you get to see, and it continues until now. Also, the state control has been continued. If I look at this recent scenario, I'm not going to discuss more about it today, but yeah. So you study something. If you look at this NGO government interactions, again, this is a lot of antagonism, and many the government has already debarred many NGOs from getting foreign funds, foreign contributions nowadays, and most of the NGOs are implementing government visions only. Yesterday, I spoke to one NGO which is based in Himachal Pradesh. So they also told me that earlier they provided funds to even academic institutions to carry out the workshop, and they jointly, like you know, uh, they, they come forward to be a partner of academic institution or university. But now they said that they have simply said COVID is the reason, but actually that's not the reason. Now said that we can have a webinar, and we will make students do their internship here, and if they apply through a procedure, so their internship will also be financed. They have said that, but again, to certain extent, just because there is a laxity of funds, they would not even come for that partnership venture. So you get to see a lot of these many examples are there. So I'll discuss about it later on. But you understood, no? So it's fine. So yeah. Sorry, it's okay. Indira Gandhi's government, you have actually seen that arrested. Most of the NGO leaders are arrested. They were arrested, they were detained. They were detained. Not aristocratic NGOs, but NGOs were detained. Most of the NGOs, like NGO leaders, were detained.
Anyone whose philosophy the Marxist ideology was,
Sorry?
you said the person's name that he was a philosophy of a person, the Marxist ideology. Who was the person? Who's the name?
That was no. You see, this Gramdan movement, Vinoba Bhave, JP Nara are not exactly Marxist because they are not driven by Marxism. But during that period of time, Marxist philosophy actually surfaced. Kisan Sabha, the trade unions also came. And you also see JP Nara is also there, JP Nara and Vinoba Bhave. So they are really Marxist, you cannot even say, but they are actually influenced by Gandhian ideology also. Gandhi and Marx, they follow the middle ground. JP Narayan and Vinoba Bhave. So not entirely Marxist because Marxists are too radical in their approach. They are not that radical. But again, they said that government doubted on the reformist agenda as a revolutionary agenda. So that was a problem during that period of time. Then also we see that when you talk about, okay, that is a brief about like brief history of NGOs. Let us see community organization. Okay, so when you say community organization, let me tell you that in the very first class we have discussed about community organization. Land report is very important. Land report. Land report. Land report is land report. 1839. Okay, so that gave a very deep understanding, not the detailed understanding of the community organization. Um, and the purpose of community organization, what are the activities of community organization. When you say community organization, basically it is a method of social work. We simply know that it is a method of social work. So community organization is a method of social work. Okay, and it tries to establish a balance between the needs of the community and the resources of the community. This is a community organization. Community organization try to systematize the existing resources within the community and in help in growth of the community and also get the community bound by that common interest most of the time. And this is also community organizations which will help to create a public understanding about their program. Okay, and at the same time, they also try to get public support for their programs, for their objectives. Okay, they also try to interrelate or coordinate with other existing organization in order to you see uh, fulfill various objectives. Okay, uh,
Some of the community organization are within the NGOs.
community organization come under the NGOs, but as I have already told you, origin is in the West. So community organization originated in the West in 1872 in the West. Okay, so we also have that Warcest, basically that Warcest, and there are some councils in urban areas. They actually try to develop one community in the West, the finance for that particular community. Even those peace council, which were converted, a conversion of that like war cyst. So that peace council also try to finance one community and try to develop some resources for the community. Okay, so that is also we can term community organization as an NGO because NGO is very broad, no? So we haven't yet discussed about that international perspective, how we look at an NGO. Okay, but if you look at that intergovernmental perspective, you need to know about whole UN, whole apparatus of this UN. I will not go that detail. I will simply focus and narrow down to NGO perspective in this UN, how NGOs are deliberated in that United Nations organization. Okay, and how they're recognized in UNO, that is important, and also their consultative status which they gain um, uh, like in their interaction with EcoShop. Did I discuss with you? So, okay. So community organization, basically when you understand a community organization, you need to understand community. What is community? What is community? And community has common interests, they do have common goals, they do have common tasks, right? We have discussed about common property, common culture, common history, right? The common goal to have a say drinking water, to get access to a pakka road, that is a common goal. That's common property, that hospitals, that nursing home, that education, the school, education apparatus, these are common property. Huh. And around which common interests develop. They do have a common land, and also they do have a common administrative structures like a village panchayat and all. They're bound by that common interest. So small scale uh, um, endeavors and come under, like that come under the definition of government of NGOs. Community organizations are also, you say, non-governmental organizations. Suppose Mahila Mandal, Annapurna Mahila Mandal came up prior to independence. Those were community organizations. But when we discuss about the NGO, we need to mention about those Mahila Mandals. Okay, so like that. And